We're continuing to see the deterioration of Donald Trump's ability to think and to speak and to sort of turn what's in his brain into words that other humans can understand. I mean, I'm almost struggling to explain what it is that we're seeing because it's so disturbing. Donald Trump had another one of these speeches where even the teleprompter couldn't make him sound coherent. We've seen this before. Take a look at Donald Trump speaking the other day, slow, slurring, sniffing, huffing and puffing, confused, unclear if he even knows what it is that he's reading off of his teleprompter. Notice that when the camera zooms out, he sort of seems to be strangely leaning on and clutching the lectern. I mean, every element of this audio and video is unusual.
Have budgets since we came into the administration, since the election of 2016, since January 20th of 2017, we have done things with the military that few people would have thought possible. Budgets of $700 billion, $716 billion, and now $738 billion. Nobody would have thought that that was possible, but we had them approved by Republicans and Democrats, and that money is now building the most advanced equipment anywhere on earth, equipment that nobody even could have conceived of even 2 years ago.
Put aside for a second that nothing he's saying is true or makes sense. There is much else going on here. This could be someone who's normally on uppers coming down or on an off day. That's one type of possibility. This could be continued cognitive decline, which we've been talking about. This could just be an exhausted 73-year-old who simply can't keep up with the demands of being president because he is obese, in terrible shape. It could be anything, but it's not normal and it's not good for the country. And as a reminder, Aaron Rupar from Vox posted this video to Twitter. The deterioration can be hard to notice day to day. When you hear Trump every day, you might not notice how much he has fallen off in terms of his speaking abilities. But look at Trump during his presidential campaign in 2015, which was already a far cry from what the guy was 20 years ago, but still comparatively quick, spry, agile, the opposite of 2019 Trump.
Because I don't need anybody's money. It's nice. I don't need anybody's money. I'm using my own money. I'm not using the lobbyists. I'm not using donors. I don't care. I'm really rich. I'll show you that in a second. And by the way, I'm not even saying that in a brag. That's the kind of mindset, that's the kind of thinking you need for this.
As a reminder, if that is not enough contrast, here's the famous incident, the United States of America, God bless the Palestinians and Jerusalem, which was initially, I guess, attributed to loose dentures, which we later found out Trump doesn't even wear.
Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians. And God bless the United States. Thank you very much.
It's not just the slurring. Okay, to be clear, when this happens, Trump seems not to recognize what he is reading or what he is saying. This is very serious stuff. If you look at a close-up of Donald Trump's face during some of these incidents, he actually sort of seems to be chewing on his tongue or having trouble getting his tongue out of the way or in a position where it doesn't hinder his speech. He's acting almost like he has full-on Novocaine from dental work or something very odd. This is not a joke. This is not political. This is just very serious. The Trump campaign is politicizing it. They are sending lackeys around to Fox News to claim that Joe Biden is actually having cognitive issues. Now, I covered the Joe Biden stuff last week. As I said, I would be a hypocrite if I point out when this stuff is going on with Donald Trump. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't point it out when it's happening with Joe Biden. But Trump's the president, not a candidate for one of the nominations for president. And Trump's having the same issues, but 10 times over, to a significantly greater magnitude. Check out Trump 2020 Director of Strategic Communications, Mark Lauder, on Fox News, just playing politics and talking about Joe Biden.
Well, unfortunately, I know a lot of people say these are gaffes, but it's clearly a problem with Joe Biden. I mean, he gets about every detail wrong in a couple of minutes about this war story. He can't remember who the prime minister of the United Kingdom is. He couldn't remember what state he was in a couple of weeks ago. I mean, these are not gaffes. It is a problem with Joe Biden, and it's causing a lot of Democrats to start to rethink their frontrunner.
This is just too serious for partisanship. I don't know what other way I can say it. Biden might have something going on. We're talking about it. It was weird when he seemed to forget President Obama's name. It's been weird when he's misstated the state that he's in or when different things happened or whatever else the case may be. Trump has a very public and very visible multi-year decline of the same type of stuff that we've seen from Biden, but worse, many times greater. Trump leaving a signing ceremony without signing the thing he was there to sign. Trump walking away from his limo. He walks off of Air Force One. The limo's right in front of him. Trump wanders off and has to be physically pulled back by Secret Service and redirected towards his car. Trump wondering where Rudy Giuliani is when Giuliani is sitting directly in front of him. Trump saying we need to find out the oranges of the investigation, almost as if he's now the citrus detective of some kind, rather than the origins of the investigation. It's endless. I could just list these things for an hour. If you care about the country and recognize and agree, maybe you don't agree, but if you agree you need a cognitively able person in the Oval Office, you need to be questioning what it is that is happening with Donald Trump. I'm open to any and all suggestions as to what it is that might be going on here. And this was not the only weird thing that happened over the long Labor Day weekend. And that's what I want to talk about next. There's been a multi-year story that we've been following, and it's the story of Brexit. And the primary question has been, will Brexit happen or will it not? Is Britain going to leave the European Union, or are they going to end up staying? And as I said, the day after the vote, June 23, 2016, it may never happen. Brexit may never happen. And of course, we now know that if the vote were to be held again today, Remain would likely win, although there are questions of, listen, they did vote this way back in 2016. For how long does that vote remain considered the will of the people? There are all sorts of questions like that. But more recently, there have been much more pressing sort of obstacles. The former Prime Minister Theresa May, multiple times attempting to finalize a deal to structure the leaving of the European Union and failing. And ultimately, the question was will she be able to outlast the criticism and the calls for her to leave? And ultimately, she left, and Boris Johnson came in. Boris Johnson, Trumpian in many ways, certainly physically in his physical appearance, although that's not the most important way, the leader of the Conservative Party, now the Prime Minister. Will he finally do Brexit for the nationalists and the isolationists who want the UK out of the EU, or will he also fail? And so far, it's really not working particularly well for him. He has, between having one Tory MP defect and kicking 20 others out for not supporting him, he very quickly seems not to have the numbers that he needs to get to the next step in the Brexit process. So bottom line, there has been one defection, a Tory MP who bailed on Boris Johnson's party. 20 other Tory MPs are Tories, or at least they were, but they didn't go along with what Boris Johnson wanted, and they were ejected. And now all of a sudden, Boris Johnson finds himself in yet another one of these embarrassing scenarios for the pro-Brexit side, giving the opposition control of the agenda in Parliament. Johnson is soon going to have to face those prime minister's questions for the first time, which can get very, very crazy. The opposition, of course, is going to continue to try to delay Brexit, and Boris Johnson may call for a general election. Really a devastating defeat for Johnson. I know that, you know, the standards and the sort of rules of decorum and how to interpret political happenings in different countries can be difficult when we're not familiarized with the system and for what the sort of Overton window is for what we can expect in terms of what is possible on one side and the other side. But this is an embarrassing defeat for Johnson. Here's video from yesterday in Parliament where members of Johnson's own party abandon him and vote to allow a debate to once again postpone Brexit. And the question becomes, does it seem as though this is ultimately turning into an indefinite postponement? Total chaos breaking out. Take a look at the first clip.
The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301.
Not a good start, Boris.
Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Another Burko fix.
Order. Of course, point of order, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think that... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let there be no doubt, Mr. Speaker, about the consequences of this vote tonight. It means that Parliament is on the brink of wrecking any deal that we might be able to strike in Brussels, because tomorrow's bill would hand control of the negotiations to the EU, and that would mean more dither, more delay and more confusion. And it would mean that the EU themselves would be able to decide how long to keep this country in the EU. And since I refuse to go along with that plan, we are going to have to make a choice, Mr. Speaker. I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. I don't believe the right honourable gentleman wants an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October the 17th to sort this out and take this country forward.
What I love about the system is that Trump definitely couldn't handle it. And I'm reminded of it because when you look at Boris Johnson, the look on, he looks very Trumpian, like I said, but he has a slightly more wit about him expression on his face than Trump. Can you imagine Donald Trump ever having to handle something like this? I mean, the guy just literally could not. He'd implode under this kind of actual intense scrutiny. And this continuing to build as eventually Boris Johnson suffering abandonments and real chaos breaks out, Jeremy Corbyn ultimately speaking.
There is no consent in this House to leave the European Union without a deal. There is no majority for no deal in the country. As I've said before, if the Prime Minister has the confidence in his Brexit policy, when he has one he can put forward, he should put it before the people in a public vote. And so, he wants to table a motion for a general election. Fine, get the bill through first in order to prevent, in order to take no deal off the table.
Order. Point order. Order. Very rude for members. Order. 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 I say to the Chancellor of the Duchy that when he turns up at our children's school as a parent, he's a very well-behaved fellow. He wouldn't dare behave like that in front of Colin Hall, and neither would I. Don't gesticulate, don't rant, spare us the theatrics, behave yourself, be a good boy, young man, be a good boy. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Things are really getting crazy. And what's even wackier is that this was all merely a debate over what to order for lunch. No, I'm kidding. But I still believe in the end that it is a likely scenario that the UK may never leave the European Union. If it does, it may not happen under Boris Johnson, the way his prime ministership has been going in its very early days at this point in time. And we actually are asking you what you think will ultimately happen. We've polled our audience every, once a year or so since this has gone down, since the vote went down in 2016. If you go to the community tab on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show/community, do you think the UK will ever actually Brexit? We will have results either later this week or maybe early next week. All right, so I already mentioned at the top of the show, in the U.S., we had this long holiday weekend for Labor Day. The David Pakman Show was off. We debuted a long-form episode that we had previously produced on healthcare. So many Americans, because of the long holiday weekend, didn't hear or see the ridiculous and embarrassing gong show of things that Donald Trump said. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the world didn't have a holiday weekend, or at least most countries didn't. Maybe somebody did. And thus, they did see and hear the absurdities that came out of Donald Trump's mouth and out of his Twitter account. In the United States, the weekend saw the approach of Hurricane Dorian, which is now made landfall, the most powerful hurricane on record at one point, heading to Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, even parts of North Carolina. Hurricane Dorian, as of last night, had already killed at least 5 people. By the time you hear this, unfortunately, but realistically, that number may be even higher. And Donald Trump says, I've never even heard of a Category 5 storm before. There have been 4 Category 5 storms during his presidency. And of course, his reaction to the ones that did damage and caused deaths in the past were disastrous and atrocious reactions and responses. Check this out. What is he talking about?
Determined and resilient, and we will support each other, and we will work very hard to minimize whatever the effect of what's coming at us. We don't even know what's coming at us. All we know is it's possibly the biggest. I'm not sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. I knew it existed, and I've seen some Category 4s. You don't even see them that much, but a Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there.
When you've already been criticized for your terrible responses to prior hurricanes, when Puerto Rico was hit, or I don't remember where it was that he showed up and shot paper towel rolls like basketballs, like some kind of game. Maybe that was Florida, maybe it was Puerto Rico. They're all kind of blending together at this point because his reaction to all of them was so horrible. And then you say, who's even heard of Category 5 before? You look even more like you don't care. When you say you've never heard of an actual Category 5 storm coming, and there were 4 during your presidency, you seem like you don't give you know what about the people that are affected by the hurricanes. Trump has said this before, by the way. He said in October of 2017, who's even heard of a Category 5 hurricane hitting land? Hurricanes Irma, Maria, and Michael were at different points in the evolution of those storms, Category 5. And then Donald Trump creating even more chaos by saying Alabama's going to get hit. Alabama was not under threat. Donald Trump tweeting, quote, in addition to Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama will most likely be hit much harder than anticipated, looking like one of the largest hurricanes ever, already Category 5. Be careful. God bless everyone. And of course, in Alabama, nobody from actual weather services had said, you're fine. I'm sorry. Nobody had said, you're not fine. Nobody has said you need to be worried. So Alabama immediately in a panic, officials right away having to say, hold on a second, the president is wrong. Everything's okay in Alabama. Alabama, you don't have to evacuate. You're going to be okay. And it's stunning that in the Trump presidency, scientists have been refuting Trump on climate for the entirety of his presidency, and even when he was just candidate Trump. And now even on weather, which, by the way, I know a lot of people on the right are probably saying, David, what are you talking about? Climate and weather are the same thing. No, they're not. And in fact, that's where a lot of confusion about climate change comes from. But now weather services having to refute Donald Trump on the subject of weather as well. Does Donald Trump have any recollection of the things that have happened during his presidency? Truly, I mean, we talked earlier about cognitive decline, memory issues, etc. Does he not care to remember, or can he not remember? Is something actually wrong with the guy's memory? So once again, serious questions increasingly being asked about, would you call this a narcissism issue? Is this a memory issue? Is it a cognitive state issue? And we had, I mean, it's terrible, really. We had yet another one of these major red flag cognitive events with Donald Trump over the weekend, which I talked about at the top of the show, another slurring and huffing and puffing, visibly confused moment from Donald Trump. These are adding up. There's multiple of these per weekend. And if you know, in a sense, the most benign explanation is Trump is merely such a narcissist focused only on himself that he just doesn't care to remember all of the other terrible storms that have happened during his presidency. in a sense, it's the most benign, but it also is the one indicative of the worst person possible. Cognitive decline doesn't mean you're a bad person. Memory issues don't mean you're a bad person. Simply not caring about other people is something where we could say, wow, he really just doesn't seem like a good guy, which of course would not come as a shock to anybody who's been following this guy for the last 10 or 20 years or however long he's been around and notable in New York City real estate. I don't want to overstate the importance of the growing Donald Trump battle with Fox News, because Trump and Fox News getting along slightly less well, as I've been telling you that they're getting along slightly less well, it doesn't really alter that in the big picture, when you zoom out, Fox carries water for Trump. Most hosts still worship the guy's every word. You've got Hannity, Tucker, Jeanine Pirro, whatever. Trump might even see the increasing battle that he has with Fox News, really only Shepard Smith and sometimes Chris Wallace and some of the weekend hosts. Trump might even see it as sport and a way to get publicity by attacking Fox. But the reality is that we don't want to overstate the importance of that conflict between Trump and some elements of Fox News, because overall they're still on the same page, and Fox is mostly a pro-Trump propaganda outlet. But the disagreements between Fox and Trump have now spread beyond just Shepard Smith and occasionally Chris Wallace, and once, I believe, Neil Cavuto. Even now, Brett Baer is having reporter John Roberts simply say Donald Trump's bogus Sharpie-altered map of Hurricane Dorian is merely that. It's bogus. It was never part of the original forecast. Now, I already told you in the last story exactly how this map was presented. Donald Trump previously saying Hurricane Dorian was on track to hit Alabama. It wasn't. Trump then tried to retroactively defend that claim by using a Sharpie, not saying he personally did it, but someone did, to make it look as though Alabama was within the reasonable cone or trajectory of that hurricane. Fox News then reported on this, and they didn't fall for it. They said this was a bogus altered map. Take a look.
John, you were in the Oval Office today for that pool spray. This afternoon, the president displaying a hurricane forecast map, but there appeared to be a change made to it. What happened there?
This was following a briefing from Kevin McAleenan, the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, and as well the comment out of the Coast Guard. This is a forecast track that the president held up from last week, where it looked like the hurricane was going to slam into the Florida coast, maybe even cross the peninsula and get into the Gulf of Mexico. You can see somebody with a Sharpie or some other writing instrument added a little bit to the cone of uncertainty, which was not part of the official forecast, which included the Florida Panhandle and parts of Alabama. President Trump had tweeted over the weekend that Alabama appeared to be in the crosshairs, and you could probably extrapolate that if it had have continued on that track, Alabama might have been affected, but it was never part of the official forecast. When asked this afternoon how that marking got on the map, the president said he had no idea. Right?
Okay, John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you.
This is hilarious, but I really want to make an effort to provide the right context for these stories, okay? When it comes to this Fox versus Trump thing. Let me zoom out a little bit. Fox News and even corporate media more broadly are what we call sense-making tools, and they are terrible sense-making tools for society. So when we talk about sense-making and media, this is maybe one of the most important analyses that we can do. And I get it. We started with a Sharpie, but again, I'm making an effort to really provide broader and important context for when we do these media analysis stories. When we talk about the sense-making analysis for media, it goes well beyond the propaganda value of media. We've talked a lot about the propaganda value of media and how media can sort of serve corporate interests or political interests for one party or another party. And you really have to zoom out to understand this. We are an estimated, on this planet, we are an estimated 7.7 billion people, each kind of existing in our little corner of it, only having an awareness of a tiny, tiny fraction each day of what happens on our planet. A nearly infinite, I know that that's not a precise term, nearly infinite, but I think people know what I mean. A nearly infinite number of things takes place every day, depending on how you measure them. Births, deaths, violence, storms, crimes, entrepreneurship, food growing, medicine, technology. Right? I mean, it's like the list doesn't do it justice, because think about everything that goes on our planet in one day. Sense making is giving meaning to what goes on in our world so that we can understand it. Because again, so much happens every day that the mind cannot actually comprehend it. So sense making is giving meaning to things that are going on. And this is actually what corporate media serves on a plate for us. We can't possibly follow every development that takes place on our planet. So what media does is not only do they explain things to us, but they also narrow the scope of what we pay attention to. And by virtue of that, they assign meaning to what areas of life should we be paying attention to. Local news, your 11 p.m. local news, takes everything that happened in the day, and it makes sense of the world by picking, it's usually like 5 stories. 1 or 2 are usually about some horrible crime that took place. They give you the weather, and then a couple of other stories. And that's how they make sense of the day for you. And as I've talked about countless times about corporate media, there is really no one media outlet, including me. I mean, I'm including myself in this. There is no one media outlet that can really do sense-making justice because there's just too much that happens in the world. So to be an informed person, I've talked about the knowledge pyramid before. Oftentimes when I go and I talk to at colleges and universities about critical thinking and epistemology, the knowledge pyramid is this thing that you have to build up. And the bottom of the pyramid is critical thinking skills, epistemology skills, learning how to think, learning how to learn. You then build the pyramid further by taking those epistemological skills and you want to gain subject matter knowledge about sociology, culture, physics, math, whatever, right? You get subject matter knowledge. And then at the very top of the pyramid is sort of like what happens day to day. You have to use that entire base of the pyramid to interpret a specific event, to solve a specific math problem, for example. When you think about knowledge this way, Fox News calling Trump out or not calling Trump out really doesn't make a big difference in terms of Fox's bigger picture sense-making capacity. But when we think of the universe in which your average Trumpist is operating, people who don't have the epistemology and critical thinking foundation, people who have not used that foundation because they don't have it to gain subject matter knowledge, for them, their pyramid is truncated. And in those cases, it actually can make a difference that Fox News is saying the Sharpie image was completely bogus. It could pierce someone's echo chamber. It could get someone to rethink their sense-making choices, and it is still a good thing. That is a lot of context, but this is, I think, how we need to be thinking about this very public sort of pseudo battle between Donald Trump and Fox News occasionally saying, what you are saying there isn't true. What Donald Trump said simply doesn't correspond to the facts. And I think that if we want to be informed news consumers and really be thinking about these things more broadly, it's fun to watch Shep Smith say Trump's a liar, but we want to actually understand the context. And in the context, for an audience that is so lacking that critical thinking pyramid and the subject matter knowledge, it could actually get them to say, you know what, maybe this guy is a liar and I shouldn't support him in 2020. And to that extent, I think it's great. Let's just not pretend that Fox News is not still 95% carrying water for Donald Trump and effectively functioning as state media. There's no way to introduce this next story other than simply to tell you what happened, which is that Donald Trump congratulated Poland on the 80th anniversary of World War II. Of course, the Holocaust sort of started with Germany's invasion of Poland. It's not exactly something to be congratulating them about. Other leaders sent messages of somber remembrance and reflection, some even warning about sliding back towards the type of authoritarianism that we saw early in the Third Nazi Reich. But Trump congratulates Poland for having been invaded by Germany 80 years ago. Take a look at this.
Yeah. I do have a great message for Poland, and we have Mike Pence, our vice president, is just about landing right now, and he is representing me. I look forward to being there soon, but I just want to congratulate Poland. It's a great country with great people. We also have many Polish people in our country. It could be 8 million. We love our Polish friends, and I will be there soon.
There is no question. I mean, the analysis here is very simple. Trump has no idea what Poland's role was in World War II. He just had no idea what the historical context was. So he said, I congratulate them. I mean, he just doesn't know anything. That's it. Trump was going to go to Poland for the World War II remembrance. He canceled the trip because of Hurricane Dorian. So he was asked instead for a message on this anniversary of a very, very dark day for Poland back in 1939. And his message was, congratulations. What was possibly the darkest day in Polish history, and Donald Trump congratulates them. This is indistinguishable from satire. If I said to someone, what's the worst possible thing you could say to Poland on the 80th anniversary of being raped and pillaged by the Nazis? Congratulations would be pretty high on the list. He does not know what happened in World War II, period. Poland lost a fifth of its population during World War II. A much bigger percentage of the Jewish population was lost in Poland during World War II. Congratulations, guys. A message of congratulations. This is not very different than congratulating Israel on Holocaust Remembrance Day. I mean, it's absolute and total idiocy. The only other possibility I can think of, and tell me what you think about this, Trump saying this happened because he doesn't know what happened to Poland in World War II is one explanation. There's a more sinister one, though, which is that Trump knows Germany invaded Poland in World War II and he likes it. I don't actually think that that's what's going on here. I try not to attribute to malice what can be more than adequately explained by stupidity and ignorance. And in this case, Trump has shown and demonstrated over the last many years no knowledge of history whatsoever. And so I would attribute this to ignorance and not malice. We're only a few days from the 9/11 anniversary. What is Donald Trump liable to say then? Not good. Not good. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at david.pakman. And while you are there, follow the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. We will take a quick break. Our long-form deep dive into the regulation of social media is coming up next. Really, really important topic. And then much more coming up after that. It's not going to come as a surprise to most people in our audience that when it comes to factual knowledge, right now we have a president that doesn't know much about economics, doesn't know much about trade, doesn't know much about currency, doesn't know much about finances or debt other than personal debt or credit or jobs or any of it. But that has not stopped President Trump from having very strong opinions about all of these things for sure. But in addition to not knowing about any of these things, Donald Trump has another interesting quality, which is that he's completely out of touch with the average American. So in other words, because he's been rich for a long time, he got rich by building a business. Well, his family was already rich. He personally built his wealth by creating a business on the back of a small loan of $1 million from his dad and then even more money from his dad. You have to take that privileged status and combine it with his ignorance on so many of these financial issues. And that's where you really get an understanding that Donald Trump, by the combination of lacking knowledge and being completely out of touch with the way that the average person lives, he can't possibly understand your financial situation. And clearly he doesn't understand your financial situation. Here is Donald Trump being asked about recession fears. Have no fear. Walmart is doing well, Trump says, and everyone's rich. So how could we possibly end up with a recession?
I don't think we're having a recession. We're doing tremendously well. Our consumers are rich. I gave a tremendous tax cut, and they're loaded up with money. They're buying. I saw the Walmart numbers. They were through the roof just 2 days ago. That's better than any poll. That's better than any economist. And most economists actually say, Phil, that we're not going to have a recession. Most of them are saying we're not going to have a recession. But the rest of the world is not doing well like we're doing. The rest of the world, if you look at Germany, if you look at European Union, frankly, look at the UK. I mean, look at a lot of countries that are not doing well. China's doing poorly. Parts of Asia are doing poorly.
Right. Walmart's doing well and people are rich, so everything's fine and a recession would be impossible. This is what happens when you combine total ignorance on all things economic with weaponized narcissism and a life of blinding privilege, literally blinding privilege that blinds him from understanding what the world is like for most people. Now, what's fascinating is that Donald Trump isn't merely saying there can be no recession. He's saying if there is one, on the off chance that there is one, it will have been the media's fault as an attempt to get him to lose the 2020 election. So we can now continue to build our picture. ignorant on all financial and economic related matters, blinded by ignorance, weaponized narcissism, and a level of paranoia that rises to the level of diagnostic. If there were to be a recession, we would blame the media who has been reporting on me in such a way to cause the economy to go into a recession. This is the trend under Donald Trump. Stocks did well this month. Oh, Donald Trump deserves the credit, of course. Stocks did poorly this month. It was the Fed. It was the media. It was China. It was whoever the president can think of. But the most disappointing and outrageous thing is this idea that everybody is doing well financially. Trump doesn't see. And when I say that, I don't mean he refuses to recognize. He's just not exposed to the reality that 40% of Americans can't afford an unexpected $400 expense without having to go into debt, take out a loan, go to a payday loan place, borrow money, or whatever the case may be, start charging stuff at interest. Trump sees his cabinet, his golf members, his family, the people he interacts with every day, and that's it. Everybody's rich. How could we possibly have a recession? When Trump says everyone is rich, I guess he means everyone that matters to him is rich. Everyone that he needs to please is rich. So there's the message from Donald Trump. We definitely would not be having a recession because everybody's rich. But if we did, it would be normal because other countries are having recessions. And it would be the fault of the Fed and China and the media. Definitely not his fault if that were to happen. This counts. I mean, we've fallen so far in terms of what counts as political positioning and discussion in 2019 America that position counts as a political position. Trump's been doing great and stocks are flying high, except when they're not, it's because of the Fed and China and the fake news media. Whenever I see these headlines, Trump says can't have a recession because everyone's rich, I still have a reaction in my brain, deep in my brain, that is a pre-Trump reaction, which is there is no way that an American president would ever say this. And that's, by the way, after having lived through 2 terms of George W. Bush, I still have that reaction in my brain. Trump used a Sharpie, or someone in Trump's administration used a Sharpie to change the path of Hurricane Dorian on a chart, which we'll get to later. That can't be true. Oh, but it is. It is true. And then I look at the quote, or I look at the video, or I hear from one of Donald Trump's flunkies. And not only are the headlines typically accurate, the reality of actually reading the quotes or looking at the video are often even worse than the headlines even suggest. I hope that his voters will hold him accountable. Now, I don't want a recession. I know that there's a contingent on the left, very small, that wants a recession in order to remove Donald Trump. That's not me. There's a big contingent of the right that claims much of the left wants a recession to remove Trump. That's based on a completely false assessment of the left. I want a good economy. If we get one, and Donald Trump is reelected or not reelected, the economy being good is good for many people, even though it still doesn't work for tens of millions of Americans. If we do get a recession, I still don't want one. If Donald Trump's supporters recognize that it's because of him, at least partially, that the recession was precipitated, then the question becomes, will that make them vote for a Democrat? Because if not, then it's all merely academic and hypothetical. So that's what I want to talk about next. How are consumers, as Donald Trump refers to them, feeling about not only the state of the economy, but Donald Trump's role in it now and his potential role in a future recession? So I got a ton of tweets over the weekend that were asking me, hey, David, are you going to be at the Straight Pride Parade in Boston this weekend? It's happening. You should be there. You should interview people. You should counter protest or whatever, because you live in Boston anyway. And no, I didn't go for safety reasons, because I didn't want to give it any attention. I ended up actually being out of the city anyway, as I often am, both during the weekend and after during the weekend. But this is not an event that appealed to me. The event happened. There were straight pride paraders. There were counter-protesters, actually more counter-protesters than paraders. There was a massive police presence. My contacts in law enforcement and the intel community told me that they were really busy managing all of the different threats and extremist groups that were expected to come in. There were more people protesting the parade than people marching for straight pride. In total, there were about 35 or 36 arrests in total. I don't know what percentage of those arrests were marchers versus counter protesters. I'm guessing at some point soon We will have that information. The marchers definitely had some themes in their messages. Support our troops was a theme. Build the wall was a theme. Great to be straight is a theme. A lot of pro-Trump stuff, just make America great again and this type of thing. Some people were hurt. 9 people ended up at area hospitals. So people here already know my feelings about this type of parade in general. A straight pride parade is unnecessary in the sense that it's not just if you have a gay pride parade, then obviously everything's fine and you should have a straight pride parade. The idea behind a gay pride parade is that we are talking about a historically marginalized and discriminated against group whose place in society good people want to affirm. Most people are straight. People don't get fired for being straight. Straight people have always been able to get married to those to whom they are attracted. I don't even want to dignify that part any further. The idea of, a white pride group, a white student union or whatever as the same thing as a Latino student union. Well, you're not talking about a historically marginalized and oppressed group, and we have to really examine what the motivations are of a lot of those groups, and the motivations aren't good, okay? So that's where we're going to stop with that analysis because it's such a stupid analysis that it doesn't even need to be done. One reason I didn't go is I don't want to give them attention. I think counter-protesting is totally valid, but they aren't really marching for straight pride. They are marching to anger people. They are marching to trigger and own the libs, as they like to say. And some of them are marching because they genuinely struggle with their masculinity, but that's a whole other story, which we're not going to talk about today. Very few of them actually show up to this stuff to really protest. And again, there were more counter-protesters this time around. What would happen if nobody showed up to counter-protest? And however many people, I don't even know how many marchers there were. Was it a few dozen? Was it 100 people? A couple? I don't know. Imagine if no one gave them any attention. They show up, they march around with their MAGA hats and their Build the Wall signs, and they're totally ignored. No one protests. No one cares. No one tries to fight the permit for the parade. They are just ignored. No one writes about it. They are irrelevant. I think that actually is a really great scenario. Now, again, I was out of town anyway, and there were all sorts of security concerns in terms of some of the extremist groups that were coming in. But these are just small groups of people doing really dumb things. What if we did just ignore them? Now, other perspectives are valid. When Bernie Sanders chose to do a Fox News town hall, the idea being, I'm going to go right in there and talk directly to people who might be on the right, and maybe I can convince them. And Elizabeth Warren said, I'm not going to participate at all because I don't want to dignify, in some sense, hate-for-profit Fox News and give them ratings. Both of those perspectives are valid. I respect what Elizabeth Warren did, and I think Bernie Sanders crushed it in his debate. But both are valid approaches. In the same way, you can take the perspective that a large showing of peace and love by counter-protesters at the Straight Pride Parade is the best way to fight against the message of the Straight Pride Parade. That's fine. I opted for a different path, and I wonder if every time they try to organize one of these, they just get the permit and nobody cares. People go and do other things. They go to the great museums in Boston. They go to all of the different great things that there are to do in Boston, and they just don't give any attention to these people. Would they keep doing these parades? Something tells me that they probably would not. They would not be doing this if no one paid attention, because the whole point of it is to get attention. So I didn't go. I wasn't there. I was out of the city in any case, but I would not have gone if I was in town, to be totally honest with you.